Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Brandon, your trusted realtor, and I'm coming to you with another great episode. We're going to talk about today's market. So, if you haven't realized, since the pandemic has started, we started in a place of a very low where the market forces just paused. No one knew what anything was going to happen with the mortgage market, but just like a magical storm or a mystical unicorn, during the summer, the mortgage environment took off. Interest rates are hit a historic low and continue to remain at a historic low. Buyers hit the market wanting properties unapologetically, and so much so that they were willing to offer 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, $80,000 above asking prices. This is not just conjecture. These are real conversations and real situations of individuals here in the Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland region. So what I want to talk to you about is the contextualization of what all of this means. I want to spend some time talking about the numbers and bringing you some data that really kind of hammers home what the current mortgage market looks like in this DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. But I want to start by really setting the stage that this data that I'm referring to, that's brought to you by the National Association of Realtors, they don't sponsor the program, but it doesn't just include what a lot of times people think is just DC or Maryland, Seat Pleasant, or just around the immediate areas. This is a much wider perspective. If you are in Frederick County, Montgomery County, the District of Columbia, Calvert County, Charles County, Prince George's County, Arlington County, Clark County, Culpeper, Fairfax, Fauquier, Loudoun, Prince Williams, Rappahannock, Spotsylvania, Stafford County, Warren County, Alexandria City, Fairfax City, Falls Church City, Fredericksburg City, Manassas City, Manassas Park City, Jefferson County, West Virginia. All of those localities are combined in this report and in this analysis, and I'll be breaking it down over the next several days so that you get the real deal. Let's dive in. All right, folks. So we are looking at the market here in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So let's dive into what we are looking at here. The chart right here shows us what today's market looks like. The median home price is going to be that red line, and the 1 year price growth is going to be the blue bars. We see in 2020, in the third quarter, that homeowners are taking home about a 12% return on their investment. You'll see, just historically, what I always like to point out to individuals is when they're on the fence about whether or not they should buy a property, the one thing that does not lie is numbers and the data. And you can see here historically in the trend that the median home price, while it has for a period of time from 2011 up to about 14, 15, remain about the same. There are a gradual increase. This last 2-3 year period from 2018 to 2020 and into 2021, homeowners are seeing a stark increase in their overall price growth. What does that mean in actual numbers and cents? Well, let's look at the actual local trends here. The current median home price in DC is just under $100,000 compared to just under $500,000. My mouth doesn't seem to want to work today. And while the U.S. average is $309,000 or median average. And so that really gives you an idea of what the market dynamics are like here in DC, right? You see overall appreciation from 1 quarter, from 1 year for the 4-quarter periods outlined there. And whether you're in DC or in other places in the country, there still is a strong seller's market. And that is just one of the things as a buyer you really have to be conscious of and you have to be aware of. That also means that as a buyer, you have to be prepared in order to enter this market so that way you can take full advantage of and be competitive. Remember, the stories of individuals who are paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 above the asking price is very true in their district, but that should not deter you, especially during this winter period. The difference here is that you're going to have to be willing to adjust your mindset on what is actually something you can move into. You're going to have to maybe potentially be open to doing some work or renovations to a property. And unfortunately, that is the environment we're in unless you are willing to spend more money in order to get the type of home that you want. Many people who I'm working with now never thought that they'd be able to actually afford in DC, and they are. And as long as you're qualified within that $500,000 marker or less, and believe it or not, there are certainly homes that are 369, 370,000, 380, 420 here in DC. But those homes are going to require that you come in probably at asking price and will not include any probably seller concessions, which is also going to be a big part of helping people with closing costs. So let's go ahead and move into the next piece of the data. You have heard me talk about the power of home ownership, the benefit, being able to put money in the bank, and it being a process of forced savings for you. But there's no better teacher than A, history, and B, seeing the numbers for yourself. What this chart shows us is the total equity that an individual accrues over a year and a quarter of their purchase. So when we look at the year of going back to 2007, you see that homeowners who chose to buy property year over year have seen increases in their home value. Now, let's immediately focus on in 2009, in the third quarter of 2009, where you see that homeowners saw a dip. But that's as we went into the pandemic, and there was a stall in the number of buyers that were in the ecosystem. There's also a stall in the number of sellers that were in the ecosystem. Yet individual homeowners still saw their total equity accrue by nearly $60,000. That's them sitting in their home, being scared, and doing exactly what renters were doing, making their monthly payments. So this is just an example to really underscore the power of your home as an asset, not only for you, but for your overall growth. Now, let's look at the total equity gain through 2020 for Q3. When we look at here, you see that exponentially for a 9-year period, for 36 months, if you've been in your home for 9 years. And remember, what I've historically told you is that when you live in your home, most first-time home buyers, it's your first home and not your forever home. And so you, on average, are in that property between 5 and 7 years. Sometimes 10, but usually 5 to 7 years is based on what the data tells us. And based on that average time frame, in Washington, D.C., individuals are taking home about $139,000 in equity. They are taking home a 6-figure return on the equity gained in their property. That's based on the price appreciation and principal payments that those individuals make. So this takes into your prevailing 30-year fixed rate mortgage at the time of the purchase and assumes a 10% down payment. Many people will be using FHA, so they'll be providing or putting down about 3.5% or 4%. So you'll definitely be putting down less than 5 or less than 10% here. So keep that in mind when you're evaluating this data. So if we were to reduce this, homeowners are still taking home in the Washington, D.C. area about $80,000 over 5 years. Now, if you've been aggressive and you've been listening to some of my other programs where you attack the amortization schedule and you make additional payments on the principal, then you'll find that you'll be much closer to this six-figure marker. So this underscores the power of what our market is doing. So a couple things you want to take away from this data and statistics. One is the power of home ownership. Is that it's a forced savings for you. You're saving money and creating wealth unknowingly. 2, there's also opportunities. Remember, I've talked to you about down payment and closing cost assistance programs. But the other piece of the equation is closing costs. That closing cost it's not going to be covered in full in most instances. And historically, what we've been able to do is leverage seller concessions, and those seller concessions have been able to help people fill that gap as well. But because we're in a seller's market and the numbers don't lie, the numbers show us that sellers are taking home what they're asking for and then some. And many of you who are buyers that are actively in the market or that were in the market this past summer, you know how many times you either got beat out or faced disappointment. So that is not to discourage you, but that is really to encourage you that the time is now to begin to ride that wave and to put yourself in a position where you can reap the benefits. All right, so if that's the data, that's the numbers. So again, remember, I'm Brandon, your trusted realtor, and I look forward to being your resource for all of your real estate needs.